Hello, my name is Austin. I have about 4.5 years experience in terms of foraging, and I've been wanting to make this YouTube series for a while. Now, often when hiking, I have friends ask me, "Oh, how do you know what that plant is?" Well, today I'm inviting you to come with me so you no longer have to ask these questions. Now, before I started edible series, I figured I should probably take a cautionary step in the series and show you the toxic plants for your safety if you're either foraging or hiking. Standard disclaimer, I, the creator of this video, am only responsible for my actions and my actions only. I am not responsible for the actions of others. This video is being made for the purposes of education and harm reduction. Do with this information as you will. Alright, so I figured the first plant should be something we're all familiar with. This is poison ivy. And this is often a plant that people mistaken other plants for being. Now, poison ivy is pretty easy to pick up on. You can see these glossy leaves, 3 leaves as per usual. But you can also see that the new growth is either a pale or has a red color, and these are very ridgy leaves, sort of looking like a tobacco leaf. Now, this is not the only form that poison ivy takes. I will show you the other form here shortly. Like I said before, poison ivy takes on more forms than just one. What you're currently looking at right now is a poison ivy vine, and how you can tell that it is a poison ivy vine is that you can see roots sticking out of the vine. This is a characteristic only really known to the poison ivy vine. If we zoom in here real quick, you'll see a shaggy vine. So just a precautionary tale, I've heard a lot of horror stories of families going out to camping trips, and their little ones will hang off these vines, and 3 hours later they'll have to go to the ER because little Susan has poison ivy all over her hands and maybe all over her forehead or something. So be wary. If it has no roots coming out of the vine, it's a safe vine. But if it's got roots, don't touch it. And here's a quick little tip. Any plant that has white berries is usually poisonous to the touch. So, if it has white berries, poison ivy, white berries, poison sumac, white berries, poison oak, white berries, don't touch the plant, and certainly don't eat the berries. But let's say you're lost in the woods and you have identified a plant you've touched as being poison ivy, but you don't have any bandages or soap or anything to wash this Arusha, the chemical known to give the rashes off of your skin. What do? Well, nature has a solution for you, my friends. What we're looking at right now, the plant I am holding, is known as Jewelweed and also nicknamed the Touch Me Not plant. Jewelweed is nature's antidote to a poison ivy rash. Basically, people who are trained in foraging and are avid backdoors people, or outdoors people rather, if they find themselves touching poison ivy on accident or they fell in a big patch, they will immediately look for this plant and then pour the sap all over the rash. And what you do basically, if you're lucky enough, you may only need one plant and you'll never need to put it on you again. But basically, you take the juices out of the stem, and this juice is basically the antidote for a poison ivy rash, and you just apply that to the rash. This can also be used as a natural alternative to poison ivy soap or things of that nature. And ironically, we have huge patches of it over here, but I always see this thing growing within a 7-foot radius of a poison ivy plant. I always found that kind of ironic and funny. Now that we've covered poison ivy, I'd like to cover a plant that's often misidentified as being poison ivy. Now, just because it's misidentified as being poison ivy doesn't necessarily mean that this plant is safe. In fact, the fruits that this plant produces are deadly toxic to people. Alright YouTube, like I said previously, just because this plant's mistaken as being poison ivy doesn't mean that it's not toxic. In fact, the fruits that this plant produces are actually deadly to younger children and can cause health problems in older people as well. And everybody has heard about this plant once or twice in their life. It's the Virginia creeper. We're not focusing on this plant right here, we're focusing on this guy. This plant is part of the grape family. Now, wild grapes in North America give us very tasty grapes, like the eastern wild grape, which will be featured in a video for edible plants. But it also produces nasty and toxic grapes, such as the Canadian moonseed and the Virginia creeper. The Virginia creeper is easy to identify when it's older, at least, because it has very serrated leaves, and it often lobes out into, well, not lobes, but it produces 5 leaves off of a central point, as you can see right there. Now, a lot of people mistaken this for being poison ivy, I think, is with the younger growth. As you can see here, this is young Virginia creeper. Let me get it to focus in there. But you can see some of these younger growth are actually 3 leaves. This growth also can be red in coloration, which throws a lot of people off. But if you have sensitive skin, I wouldn't be touching this plant. I used to weed these out with my bare hands as a child. I never really had a problem with it, but the sap from this plant can become a skin irritant, making your skin a bit itchy. Not to the point of a poison ivy rash, but it is an irritant. As you can see up here, this is also young Virginia creeper. And the fruits, the grapes that this plant produces, will be blue. These will cause potential kidney failure. I read a story on a child a few years ago on the East Coast who ate the fruits off of this plant and had died of kidney failure. On to the next plant. What we're looking at right now is the Polk Berry, also known as the Milkweed. It's not quite done flowering yet. Well, it seems right here it is. But this plant, when the berries are ripened, they will be a very dark color, but they'll have very, very potent and staining red juice. Now, just because this plant is poisonous, a lot of people do like using this for its ink properties. You may have heard the myth from the South about Polk Berry wine. This isn't true. No one's ever made wine out of polk berries. What actually happened is they took the dye out of the berries and inserted it into cheaper wine, lower grade wine. But it's fairly easy to identify because it grows very tall, usually in groups of 1 to 3 plants, and it'll have these giant leaves coming out of it with a red stem, and when it's done ripening, when the fruits come out, they will be a very dark color, and the stem on that will usually turn a burgundy as well. So you can use it for ink, but that's about it. Now, a lot of people like to eat the younger sprouting greens, and it is possible. There's a lot of debate whether we should or shouldn't. But basically what is suggested is that you boil these, and the younger ones, like the sprouts, You boil these in 7 changes of water and eat them. I personally wouldn't touch it because, for one, I'd be too paranoid, and for two, putting that much work in for this plant seems a little ridiculous. And that kind of leads me to believe that this isn't really nutritious either. So, yeah. On to the next plant. Alright, YouTube, so this is the next plant. This is the plant credited for being how Socrates, the famous philosopher, was killed. This is poison hemlock. By Athenian law, Socrates was ordered to drink a cup of its juice, and it slowly killed him. This is a slow-acting plant, so it may be possible to go to a hospital to receive treatment, but back then that probably wouldn't very readily been available, if at all. These plants get very tall. This plant probably easily has another foot on me. I'm about 5'8". But when these plants bloom, which would have been about a month ago, they have a very distinct stench. It's only what I can describe as a mixture between Reese's peanut butter cups and kind of herby. I believe if you cut the plant to the sap will have a similar smell. I don't really mess with these when they're this big. For one, they look pretty cool anyway, but for two, it's just going to be easier when it's dried out to extract and get it out of the yard, because as you can see, even after years and years, hold on, the focus on this camera is kind of buggy sometimes. Even after years and years of weeding this out of this area, it still comes up, and you can kind of get a good look for it yourself. There's a ladybug up there. I'm way too close to it, but yeah, that ladybug's eating off of its seeds. But yeah, this is a deadly poisonous plant. And the reason why I put this one on this list is because it looks quite familiar to an edible plant. And that's what we're going to show now. But first, let me show you a smaller one. This is usually why it gets mistaken with these little plants right here. This is still a poison hemlock, even down here. But I'm going to show you the plant it gets mistaken by. What you're looking at is the wild carrot. And I'd really like to get closer to it, but ironically, it is literally in a sea of poison ivy. This is about as close as I'm getting to it. But wild carrots are edible, while on the other hand, its look-alike poison hemlock will kill you. Here's what you need to know. Wild carrots have a different flower pattern. This is the best identifier. They have similar leaf patterns, but a different flower. As you can see, you'll see a bunch of little thistly looking hairs coming out of the bottom of that flower pod, and the flowers are more uniformed, whereas the poison hemlock flowers are white and a similar shape, but will be in more of a ball spherical shape. As you can see, this is more in an inverted dome type shape. The final plant I wanted to cover in this series, ironically, is a somewhat edible plant. This is the least edible plant, and I figured it was a good segue into the edible series I'm going to start. This is the milkweed. The milkweed is easy to identify because it has these broad leaves, and they grow opposite to each other in a very, very organized pattern. One will be north to south, one will be east to west, and it'll just keep going in that symmetrical pattern. Now, you can eat some of the mature leaves if you boil them in 2 changes of water. If not, it is poisonous, but you can eat the younger leaves, as you can see in there, those you can eat raw in small, modest quantities. The fruits are also edible, but once again, you're going to have to boil them in 2 changes of water. You'll know this is a milkweed when two fruits will pop up, 2 fruit pods mature, but before that you'll see 2 spherical looking flowers that are a very light to medium purple color when they blossom. And once those fruits mature out of the flowers, you can boil those twice and eat them. So it's not as strenuous as pokeweed, but there is still some precautionary measures and preparations to be made. And that concludes this episode. Come back next time when we dig into edible plants. Thanks for watching, guys. So there you have it. I found, just in my yard alone, 5 poisonous plants, varying in toxicity from plant to plant. Some, like poison ivy, leave a rash. Some, if you digest them, like the Virginia creeper or poison hemlock, can kill you. And some will make you sick, like milkweed and Polk Berry. So I'm making this video as a precautionary step, or I made this video as a precautionary step, because I'm making this video with the mindset that people will probably go out and try to forage for themselves. So I figured I would put this information out there to let people know of the poisonous plants in their area. The one plant I wasn't able to find in my yard was poison oak, but it's basically the same pattern as a poison ivy plant, but the leaves are mutated and it looks like oak leaves, but it grows in a vine. So yeah, that's about it, YouTube. I will upload shortly here a video, the first part of edible plants. So please keep this in mind when you're foraging, that some plants will kill you. But anyways, peace out, guys.